Good morning, Dean. I have just completed my outline, and that should be in your email shortly. And I'm going to do the presentation now. So, my presentation, as you know, was on sex trafficking or human trafficking as a whole, focusing on sex trafficking. And the first thing I want to talk about is the types of human trafficking that we see. The first one, of course, is sex trafficking, which is the selling of individuals for sexual acts. Labor trafficking, which is the selling of these individuals to perform forced labor. We have domestic minor trafficking, which is basically when the parents or guardian of a child sells them into the trafficking ring for money. So say a family is poor and they come to the ridiculous decision to sell their child, they can do that, and that's called domestic minor trafficking. In sex trafficking, your victims are more likely to be female. When in labor trafficking, it is more likely to be male due to the thought of them having greater physical capabilities. The second thing I want to talk about is who is most at risk for being sex trafficked. Individuals who have rough home lives or are mistreated by their parents, and this can be due to because if they're mistreated, it might make them want to run away, and runaway children are one of the main pulls that these sex traffickers and labor traffickers draw from. Individuals who are lacking capable guardians while in public, that's like you take your kid to the grocery store and you lose sight of the kid. Like I said, runaways or homeless individuals, and those from places that poverty is high, low income, these inner cities, these are hot spots. The third thing is the processes in which individuals can be trafficked. And kind of going back to the previous slide, individuals can be picked up by traffickers in the streets. They could just be walking around, or they could be homeless. And sex traffickers usually always get their victims from the streets, parking lots. Individuals who are migrating to different countries for better living opportunities are at an increased risk of being picked up by traffickers. And I really didn't think about this much prior to my research, but the reason that migrating individuals are more at risk is because the ships, the ports, the borders, it makes it easy for sex traffickers to get them and take them across borders without being seen. And individuals, if they are a specific age, can be sold into trafficking by their family members. Like I mentioned, the domestic minor trafficking. Next is places in which sex trafficking can take place. And the main one that people really don't think about is the day spas and nail salons. People don't think about the person that's doing their nails and the fact that they could, after hours, be victims of sex trafficking. There have been many cases in which nail salons have been shut down and stuff because they had been charged with sex trafficking. Victims can be moved from motels and hotels. This is also a hot spot because these traffickers can take these victims to one hotel and move them from room to room, and it's just a huge money market for them. And national sporting events. This is something that I found during my research that I wanted to put in as a side note. National sporting events can be a huge market for youth labor and sex trafficking. You see these little kids at these ball games selling hats, selling stuff, but you don't really take into consideration that they might be a victim of trafficking. The next thing is there any assistance for sex trafficking victims? There are not as many assistance programs, in my opinion, as there should be. There are, however, specific advocacy programs that assist in mental and physical rehabilitation. Medical centers come into play by doing health screenings and assistance. And these assistance programs do not always have the positive impacts that they're supposed to have. Bringing someone into rehabilitation for their mental illness from being a victim sometimes can just elevate their mental illness. It can make it worse. I put a real world situation on here. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard about the case involving Robert Kraft, the New England Patriots owner, who was believed to have been part of a huge sex trafficking operation. It was said that armed guards were believed to have used weapons to safely transport these victims from place to place. And in the end, Robert Kraft saw no punishment, and I believe it's just because he has money. I believe that he's a celebrity. He paid his way out of getting in trouble for this. Why victims don't always come forward about their victimization. Sometimes these victims live in fear that if they do come forward about their victimization, then their trafficker is going to find some way to get back to them and end up harming them worse. Some victims have no trust in the justice system, and this is growing every day. The justice system is losing more and more trust from individuals, and so victims don't come forward because they feel like the justice system is just going to belittle them, not going to do nothing for them. And the pure physical and mental trauma can completely ruin a victim's mental state, and for this, they just shut themselves off, they don't seek help, and in the end, it just hurts them worse. I put a list of state and federal laws, just a couple. The Victims of Trafficking and Violence Prevention Act is used to combat trafficking in persons, especially into the sex trade, slavery, and involuntary servitude. This act has been reauthorized 3 times, once in 2003, 2005, and finally in 2008. As for the state of North Carolina, the trafficking of an adult victim is a Class F felony, while the trafficking of a kid is a Class C felony, with both of these being punishable with lengthy prison sentences. And the last one I put was the Crimes Legislation Amendment of 2013, which combats slavery or slavery-like conditions and people trafficking. The agencies, I just made a list of agencies that deal with human trafficking on a day-to-day basis. First, we have the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI, the Center for Human Trafficking Awareness, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the Polaris Project, the different advocacy programs. And finally, I want to touch on the places, as in like the states and stuff, that are more at risk for sex trafficking. As I mentioned earlier, border states such as New York, Maine, Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, North and South Dakota, these are more at risk because of the easy access to the water. The easy access to the water allows these sex traffickers to move their victims quick, easy, and without chances of being seen. Now, countries that are most at risk. Poverty-ridden countries, parts of Africa, stuff like that. Countries with high migration rates. We have seen a rise in Latino sex trafficking victims, and this is because they get pinched trying to cross the border, and these sex traffickers get a hold of them and send them into the trafficking ring. And the last thing that could lead to a country being more at risk is having little to no regulations on sex trafficking. Countries basically don't care about sex trafficking, they don't have laws for sex trafficking, and therefore it makes it easier for them to be taken and put into sex trafficking. And with that, the last thing is my sources, so that's gonna do it.